was going to class, so I rushed over to class to see what the people were doing, because I assumed everybody was going to just be glued to the TV, because it was so shocking. Here he was in that parade, and it must have been about 10 o'clock their time.
Okay.
Dallas time, and a little after 11, that I heard about it. I went back and I said, well, where is there? I mean, there weren't a lot of TVs in those days.
Sure.
So
probably fewer channels.
But that was, every channel was glued on that. I mean, the assassination of the president, and I think everybody knew pretty early. I think it was at least 3 hours before they declared that he was murdered, assassinated, really. And I think they didn't want to declare it. As you listen to things, because President Johnson took the oath of office in one of the military airplanes that was being flown from Washington back to Texas.
Okay.
And that's where I thought you'd have to take the oath of office from the Supreme Court justice, how they got them all on the airplane and everything going. I don't, I can't remember that, but I remember he took that oath of office on an airplane, which I found very strange. But the whole day was so surreal, because you just, when you think of 1963, the Bay of Pigs had ended. Things seemed to be going better for the president. The situation in Vietnam was starting to build, but it didn't reach the crescendo it reached in 65, 66 when we sent all the troops, and then in 68 when the Tet Offensive occurred and caused the President of the United States to say he wouldn't run again.
Okay.
But that morning to be going to school and the president's been assassinated, and I remember we still held classes. I thought certainly the law school. But,
now, were you still involved in politics back then? Or?
Oh no, I wasn't involved in politics at all. I just, in those days you could not change your voter address like they can. It's much easier today, because I was a student in Ann Arbor, had an apartment, year round. Although I didn't stay there year round, I'd come home in the summertime. But you have to, and I would try and sublet it or something.
Okay.
But I remember I had worked on the Kennedy campaign in '61 when he ran.
Okay, so it had to be pretty.
That was the first year I was able to vote. And we celebrated because we carried one precinct in Ann Arbor, one Democratic for the president. And it was the first time since the first term of Roosevelt that an Ann Arbor precinct had ever voted for a Democratic president.
A little different nowadays.
Yeah, when you think about it today, how liberal but how conservative it was then. And it's funny because the students were very liberal then. Today the students are a lot more conservative than the faculty that's teaching them. And maybe that's the natural balance of order or something, but I still laugh about that. We had a party, because if you remember, no, you wouldn't remember that election.
No, that was about 24 years before I was born.
But California didn't come in. That was the deciding state.
Okay.
And it didn't come in until 4 or 5 the next day, not the morning, the next afternoon. I mean, the votes were so close. And so I think, everybody, when they looked at that president and his win, and he was, such an inexperienced, in a sense, candidate compared to, although he came from an old line of politicians in Massachusetts. He was just a certain aura about him. So to think that somebody would assassinate the man was, I think, unfathomable. I mean, the last assassination before that was McKinley, 1900.
Okay.
And then before that was Garfield. So I think those are the 3 assassinated presidents. I mean, Reagan was wounded,
Right.
certainly later, but fortunately was not assassinated. Campus that evening, as you can imagine, I mean, everybody. In those days, there would be one place in a quadrangle or a dormitory that would have a TV, so just everybody's sitting in front of that TV, because there were no TV sets. You could have radios in your room, but nobody could afford a TV, I don't think.
Sure.
Even if you could have one in those days. And everybody was just sitting there, just stunned. Just to think that, and they've had all these theories. I mean, after that was the Warren Report, and that it was a single gunman, and you heard the guy from the prosecutor from New Orleans, it had to be more than a single gunman. It couldn't be. And somebody just was saying again, as we're coming up to the 50th anniversary on the 22nd, I think it is, that it was multiple shooters.
So do you buy the official story, or do you subscribe to one of those other?
No, I do. I think colossally absurd, tragic things can happen. You could say that guy could have shot that thing 1,000 times and never even hit the car, let alone the president or John Connolly, I think, was in car. He was the governor of Texas at the time with the president. And you would say, there isn't a chance you can make that kind of a shot. And I don't know if they ever found I think they said they found the gun that shot the president with, and I was trying to think of the guy the man that assassinated the president that they arrested for it, because a week later, that crazy guy, as they were taking him from one lockup to somewhere else to either arraign him or do something, that guy came up and shot him, who owned a bar or something, was a buddy of the governor's or somebody.
And that was broadcast live on TV.
Right, yeah, you saw that live on TV, that's right. And I mean, it was just a surreal week in the history of this country. I mean, we must have talked about it the rest of that semester and all of next year. How could this happen? How could that guy do that? And of course, being that he was murdered,
You'll never know.
Would know what his thinking was. I mean, assuming that you accept that, but I can't believe that Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and a lot of other very reputable men would create a story, because all of the people who say they're multiple gunmen have never said that it was a conspiracy of the Soviet Union or some other country that would have something against the interests of the United States, are suggesting that it was that kind of a national assassination plan. So it doesn't just make sense to me that there's a couple guys got together and said, let's go shoot the president. I mean, I don't know who
Sure.
sits around and dreams up that stuff.